If we could have our ushers come up and... I'm learning. If you could lead us in prayer. Amen. Anything else anyone would like to add before I get started? Okay, today I'm going to be talking about King Solomon, the son of David. King Solomon, or Jedediah, was the wisest ruler Israel ever had. Jedediah is a beautiful name if you think about it, what it means in Hebrew. In Hebrew, Jedediah means beloved of the Lord. Isn't that beautiful? There's 3 books that are connected to him and written by him. The first is Proverbs, the second is Ecclesiastes, and finally the Song of Solomon. Solomon was considered the wisest man. He was a biblical king, most famous for his wisdom. King Solomon even prayed for wisdom in 1 Kings chapter 3. I mean, wow, at some points of his life, we're most likely thinking, wow, if only I could be more like him. 1 Kings chapter 4, verses 29 through 31, it says, "And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding exceeding much, and largeness of the heart, even as the sand that is on the seashore. And Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east country and all the children of Egypt, for he was wiser than all men." Do you hear that? You heard that right. He was wiser than all men. Let that sink in for a moment. But even though at one point in the Bible he was wiser than all men, Solomon is definitely not without his faults and blames. As we find out, he ends up falling short like most people do, and he ends up marrying hundreds of women. And he is deceived to follow their gods. This begins the Israel's sinful descent. We learn so much about his successes and shortcomings. I could go on and on about the life of Solomon, how he lived, but today I will be focusing on the book of Proverbs. It was written by King Solomon. It is often referred to as literature and poetry, dealing with God's wisdom. If you translate Proverbs from the Hebrew term, it means comparison, so there are lots of comparisons in this book. In Proverbs, we find 10 speeches from a father to his son. How beautiful is that? We can all remember in our life talking to our father and saying, well, Dad, you don't know everything. And then now that we're older, we think, man, if only I could be back sitting with my father having those conversations. Anyways, in Proverbs 1:8, it starts off with a very strong message. "My son, hear the instructions of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother." Did you hear that? Hear the instructions of your father. I think this is really important because at some point once we get older and we move out on our own, we become equal with our parents. But I think this is specifically talking to like somebody who's still with their parents. So the message of this whole chapter is to listen to your father is the key of this message. It goes on to say in Proverbs 1:8, My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not, meaning do not agree to the things that God clearly says not to do. It even goes on to say, don't even walk with them. In Proverbs 1:15, to refrain thy foot from their path, for their feet run to evil and make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. This is saying that they do not care who sees, what type of bird they catch, good or bad. They're going to do their sinful ways anyway. In the book of Proverbs, the father also warns his son about falling away. The father warns him about evil and folly. According to the King James Dictionary online, folly means that which embellishes something which added to another thing renders it more beautiful to the eyes. And embellish means make something more attractive by the addition to decorative details or features. We often try to do this with makeup or with art and painting. I oftentimes see my mom painting, trying to add that last little stroke of brush, trying to figure out when it will be the most beautiful, and that's definitely what this is talking about. Proverbs has a lot of clear and easy to understand statements from God. If we would only listen to them, what a better world this would definitely be. In Proverbs chapter 1, verses 2 through 6, it says, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, to give subsidy to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto the wise counsels. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. I think what you can get out of that is it really reminded me of the Elvis Presley song, Only Fools Rush In, where it goes, wise men say only fools rush in. And I think that is why Elvis Presley wrote that song, because he had a troubled life, but I'm sure he opened the Bible and looked at this, and that's why he wrote that song. Like in Proverbs chapter 1 verse 7 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instructions. And that goes back to the Father giving instructions, and that's why it is so important to listen to the Father. Fear is why we stay away. I truly believe this, because if I repeat that one, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all knowledge. And fear is why we stand away from very tall buildings. And fear is why when we jump out of a parachute, we jump out of a plane, we have a parachute on. Fear will do those types of things. And the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all knowledge. Once you start to fear the Lord, that is so true. Even in the song we just sung, Amazing Grace, it goes, it was grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. So it can go both ways, and I truly believe that. But I want you to pay very close attention to the word wise. According to an online King James Version dictionary, wise means properly having knowledge, hence having the power of discerning and judging correctly. What I want you to get out of this is that wise men will keep learning and will not only hear the words of God, but listen. So many people say, well, I go to church, I hear the word of God, but did you act upon it? That's what's most important, because even God said, I know you not, sinners of iniquity, depart from me. And people like that all went to church. When we accept Christ and start to follow Jesus, we are held to a much higher standard. People are watching you now more than ever. So I think we can learn a lot from Solomon, but this barely scratches the surface. I could go on and on about Solomon, and if I could, I would go from the first chapter all the way up to the 9th chapter, because that's where all of the conversations come from a father to a son. And I just think how beautiful that was laid out. Today we talked about Solomon, what his name means in Hebrew, which is beloved of the Lord, and the 3 books he wrote. I also talked about some of the 10 speeches from a father to a son. I talked about Solomon and how he was the wisest man of all. And it's amazing how much somebody can change from the wisest man of all to ending up marrying, and I think it was, to be exact, 700 women he married. 700, think about that, 700 women he married, and God could still forgive you even with all those sins that you're bearing. I talked about how he was the wisest man. Before I close, I want you to ask yourself, are you truly saved? Have you truly accepted Christ into your life? I just pray for everybody that they come to know Christ, because the world, there's lots of signs. Nobody knows the time nor the hour, but there's lots of times coming that says it's the end is near. So I thank you for your time, and if Brother Dion has anything else he wants to add, he's more than welcome to come over here. And I hope you guys got a lot out of this, and I wasn't too fast for you. Yeah. But he was literally at one point in the Bible deemed the wisest man of all. So just think about that.